In the United States Capitol Visitor Center, on the northern wall of Emancipation Hall, lies a lone block of Aquia Creek sandstone. It's a marker that commemorates the workers who built the Capitol, including many African American slaves. The fact that slaves helped build one of the world's symbols of freedom is a cruel irony of American history. That's perhaps one of the reasons that American history and Black history are so entwined. First conceived by historian Carter G. Woodson and celebrated starting in 1926 as Negro History Week, the celebration of Black history, culture, and accomplishments was expanded to a month in 1976, the nation's bicentennial. It was just a few short years after the Declaration of Independence that construction on the Capitol began in 1793, and slave labor was used extensively for the new nation's seat of government.
Whether we talk about its construction by slaves or we talk about the fact that this building in all of its glory has created some very dark times for African Americans, and then you walk by a picture of Shirley Chisholm or Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King, and you see that it also holds some of the images of our best.
Some of our most revered founding fathers, such as Thomas Jefferson, were slave owners. Their fight for freedom would not reach down to African Americans in the country for several generations, culminating with the start of the Civil War in 1861 and the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, and the passage of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in 1865.
Yeah, I think it's hard to miss Frederick Douglass and his investment and his dedication to this country. It's hard to miss a guy who stood on the Constitution and said, this Constitution means more for me than it does anybody else. That this Constitution suggests, the Founding Fathers got it right, that we are all gifted, given with inalienable rights. And that I'm not half a man, not a 3/5 of a man, I am a man, and I should be treated with the same privileges and the same protections under this Constitution. Here's a man hundreds of years ago who fought for my freedom, fought for my independence, not by saying the Constitution was wrong, but by saying he got it right.
It wasn't until 1879, though, following the ratification of the 15th Amendment, that the first blacks served in Congress, starting with Hiram Revels, a Republican senator from Mississippi. It would be almost another century, though, until the first African American was elected to the Senate by popular vote. Republican Edward Brooke of Massachusetts, who was elected to the first of two terms in 1966. In 1971, 6 years after the Voting Rights Act was enacted to ensure blacks' right to vote, the growing number of black lawmakers formed the Congressional Black Caucus, an organization that is still going strong. Over the years, the Capitol complex and the surrounding neighborhood has increasingly honored black history and black Americans' contributions to the nation. From abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who made his home in Washington, to Mary McLeod Bethune, a Washington educator who shares space with Abraham Lincoln at the National Park Service's Lincoln Park, which is just a few blocks from the Capitol.
And I had the privilege of offering the invocation when Rosa Parks was lying in honor in the Capitol Rotunda. Now, imagine this. I mean, I was in Alabama in the 60s when segregation was legal. And to fast forward, and years later, I'm standing in the Capitol Rotunda, and I'm able to frame that moment with a prayer.
Perhaps most significantly, the connection was shown in stark terms as the nation's first black president, Barack Obama, departed Washington on a military helicopter that lifted off of the east front of the Capitol on Inauguration Day, just a few yards away from the sandstone marker that commemorates slave laborers who built the Capitol.
And I thought about all that he had done. I thought about all the fights that he had fought. I thought about how the Republicans resisted him at every turn, and that he was still able to achieve a lot. And I thought about how he had been a shining example to show not only African American children, but all children, that you can become anything you want to become if you work hard and give it your best.
From the construction of the Capitol to the passage of the 13th Amendment outlawing slavery, from the election of the first black members of Congress to the formation of the Congressional Black Caucus, from the first black president to deliver a State of the Union address to the unveiling of a statue of Rosa Parks in the Capitol. Black history is a part of the fabric of the Capitol and its institutions, its representatives and senators, its staff, and its officers.
History can be just a great adventure. So what didn't we find, or are there any African Americans that had something to do with technology in terms of computers? What's going on? And did African Americans or any other group that you might be interested have something to do with this subject?
See, I think a lot of people don't even know the history of African Americans, and they try to set it aside as if it's, African Americans just contributed here, contributed there. Our diversity is not our problem. Our diversity is our promise.
I would say that there is enough evidence of polarization regarding race in America that we still need to be reminded of the contribution of non-majority individuals.
If I'm going to govern, if I'm going to be a part in the process of governing for a diverse population, I think you need a diverse workforce so that they will be sensitive to that entire population. It just makes sense to me. And by the way, it's priceless.